Carolina Panthers wrapped up mandatory minicamp on Wednesday. What stood out to me? Well, I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday right now as we're in off-season mode. But starting right before training camp, I'll be back to your team every day, which is, of course, our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. In the meantime, subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Friday, I'm going to be answering your weekly mailbag questions for the final time until July 19th, right ahead of training camp. Going to be going through our positional breakdown starting next week. So not going to be having a weekly Friday mailbag after this upcoming Friday until mid-July. So get those questions into me, and I would gladly answer them on Friday's show. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. By the way, at me at Julian Council, or DM me at Julian Council, just in case I forgot to tell you how to get those mailbag questions into me. All right, Panthers wrapped up mandatory minicamp on Wednesday. They could have done 3 days, but they decided to only do 2 days, which is kind of been commonplace here. Last year, Frank Reich, that was the case. Matt Rule, that was also the case. Dave Canales decides 2 days. We're good. Enjoy your summer, boys, and I'll see you, I guess men, they're not boys, men, and I'll see you at the end of July right here in Charlotte for training camp ahead of the 2024 season. And over the last couple of days, we got to hear from Dave Canales, from Bryce Young, from Jadeveon Clowney, from Miles Sanders, from Shaq Thompson, from Deontay Johnson, Eddy Pineiro. So I want to spend some time talking about the things that stood out to me from each of those individuals, really trying to focus just on one thing, even though with a couple of them, there were multiple things that stood out to me that I want to talk about here on the show, some thoughts about some contract talks. And of course, we got to look at the injuries as we head into the summer break and wonder who will and will not possibly be available once we get down to training camp at the end of July. So let's start off by talking about the one thing that stood out to me, even though I'm going to cheat and give you maybe more than one thing from certain individuals. Dave Canales, the head man here in Carolina as the head coach, had a couple of things that stood out to me from his Wednesday availability. He did say on Tuesday that Bryce Young looked the best he had seen him all offseason long. So there's me giving you more than one thing already. But the first thing that really stood out to me was he was impressed by the defense's focus on attacking the football. When we have the conversation about how good was this defense really last season, you can bring up a lot of good numbers, like their scoring defense, or not scoring defense, my bad, that was a bad number, like the total defense as far as how many yards they gave up, pass defense, all of that. But when you look deeper, you see a defense that EPA-wise, expected points added, and also looking at DVOA, they were among the bottom third in the NFL. You look at the sack percentage, not great. Pressure rate, also not great. And also turnovers, dead last in the league. You think about one of the games Panthers did win last year against Atlanta, they won that directly because they took care of the football. The Falcons did not take care of the football. Dave Canales talked about he's impressed by the defense's focus on attacking the football, how this offseason they spent a lot of time working on those drills. They can't tackle, but he can see that mentality, that instinct getting into those players to be able to jar the ball loose and create turnovers, something they did not do well last year. We have not really heard in the past from Frank Reich, who really didn't give us much at all, and even Matt Rule, about standouts during the offseason program. Dave Canales, he's been giving us a lot. He said that Derek Brown, Chuba Hubbard, Tommy Trimble, those were the three guys that really stood out to him, the three guys that came to work and set that foundation of what is expected under him in Carolina. He felt like he's going to have to come in and lay the groundwork of what things need to look like, how you need to work. And instead, guys like Derek Brown, who has been paid handsomely this offseason, Chuba Hubbard, who's entering into the last year of his deal, and watch this team take his potential replacement and really likely replacement and then Tommy Tremble, who also saw somebody come into Carolina who could replace him, but I think at least complement him this season, and Jadeveon Sanders. All three of those guys, varying circumstances, have come into this offseason and have worked their tails off to wash away the must of a 2-15 season that we all had to endure last year, but really they had to do it on the field week in and week out. Then the final thing, that was a real eyebrow raiser and big time offseason coach speak. You talk about the versatility in the tight end room. Talk about they have good tight ends. We have seen that has not really been the case in the pass game. In the run game, fine. But in the pass game, versatility-wise, haven't really seen that from Tommy Tremble that much. We haven't really seen it from Ian Thomas since his first year or two here in Carolina. And, of course, Jadeveon Sanders is coming in to do that, give them versatility paired with what they have already. And Stephon Sullivan can be that as well. And Jordan Matthews has played wide receiver in the league, and he's more of a wide receiver than he really is a tight end. I found that to be interesting. We'll see whether the tight end group here in Carolina can do something in the pass game. In the run game, I expect them to do a lot. But in the pass game, can they catch the ball? Can they get open? And once they catch it and get open, can they do something with it? We will see. Bryce Young also spoke to media on Wednesday. And the one thing that stood out to me, and there was only one thing with Bryce, he said, we're in an attacking offense, which is not something you would call the Panthers offense under Frank Reich and Thomas Brown. Not something you would call it under Jeff Nixon as an interim OC, or under Ben McAdoo, or even under Joe Brady, where the offense did look pretty good year one. Hear that they're an attacking offense with the addition of Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt inside at guard, bringing in Deontay Johnson via trade from Pittsburgh, drafting Xavier Legette as well out of South Carolina. Then you add Jonathan Brooks, you add in Jadeveon Sanders, an attacking offense. I like the sound of that, but also I'm going to need to see it. I'm going to need to see it, Bryce, but I love the vibes that are coming out of Panthers offseason mandatory minicamp. Jadeveon Clowney, we did not see him during OTAs. He was there for the first voluntary minicamp back in April, which is great. He did not have to be there for the voluntary portion of the offseason that occurred the last 3 weeks, but he was there for the mandatory portion of the offseason, and he's happy to be home. The one thing that really stood out to me from him is, I'm buying into the scheme again. That was his quote. He says it's a similar scheme to what he ran in Houston when Romeo Crennel was the defensive coordinator there for the Texans. And if you look at his final 3 years in Houston, and Clowney was trying to remember the stats, looking at Pro Football Reference, and sometimes the stats are different on certain sites, he was a Pro Bowler. Each of his last 3 seasons in Houston looked like the number 1 overall pick coming out of South Carolina. 24.5 sacks, 53 tackles for loss, really good numbers for Clowney those last 3 years. Look at the next 2 seasons once he left Houston. 3 sacks in Seattle, 0 in Tennessee. Then after that, had a good season in Cleveland. Then he came out to Cleveland, wasn't as good the second time around. He mentioned the outside perception of him after what went down in Cleveland, and talking to a Ravens teammate, he said, can't imagine no one wanting to play with you. You're a great guy. And he's like, yeah, I already knew that. Which is great for Clowney to not really be too concerned about the outside and understanding who he is and knowing who he is. So bringing that up, he played well in a 3-4 scheme. That's what Jerry Rivera runs here in Carolina. And I'm also someone on the outside. I haven't watched every single snap that Jadeveon Clowney has played in the NFL. I look at the numbers. I look at what PFF has, and I, sometimes see the clips. And also, we all have the expectation of what we thought he was going to be coming out of South Carolina. I don't really think he's been that. Now, there's been injuries. There's also, I guess, been the scheme that maybe did not fit him. And you wonder, if the scheme doesn't fit you, why take that opportunity? Either way, he's happy. He's at peace to be back home in the Carolinas, and of course here in the Charlotte area in Rock Hill, which I'm happy for him, and I'm hopeful that he can replicate what he did in Baltimore, but really replicate what he did the last 3 years in Houston, as he is on a 2-year deal. Now, he did say that really it's a 1-year deal. Every deal, he says, in the NFL is a 1-year deal. My only question to him is Pat Mahomes' deal also a 1-year deal? Joe Burrow and some of the other high-paid quarterbacks, probably not, but I understand what he's talking about, how the team can say after 1 year, you didn't do enough, we don't want to see you the second year, or the player could say after 1 year of that deal, I want a new deal. Either way, he said every year I sign, I work for the next year, and he certainly is going to be working for that next year, as he is signed for 2 years in Carolina. And if he does not have a big season, does not do what they expect him to do, he won't be here next year. My hope is he does everything that they are paying him to do, and he gets another year as a Panther, and maybe even more than another year as a Panther. And another interesting anecdote, not antidote. He wasn't going to play last year because he was not going to take league minimum. He pointed out there were times where he could have re-signed, say in Seattle, which I know was definitely true, and in Cleveland, which he did, some of the other teams, he decided, I'm not taking league minimum. And last year was that case where he's not going to take that. He knew he was better, and he was willing to sit out until he got the right deal. And he worked his tail off to be in position to get the right deal and to play the way he did play last year. So I found that to be interesting that he was not going to play, but he ended up, of course, playing for the Ravens, which he had a great season. And now he's here back home in Charlotte, Rock Hill, really, and playing for the Panthers. Last one from Shaq Thompson. The one thing that stood out to me from Shaq, this team has come together fast. He talked a lot about the energy within the building, and especially on defense, where he's seen Frankie Louvu, he's seen Brian Burns, he's seen Jeremy Chin, he's seen Dante Jackson, he's seen his brothers leave this offseason, and he's also seen a lot of new guys come in who have had those good vibes and have also been in this scheme before. And Shaq's more comfortable in it, even though didn't play really in it that much last season. He had the whole offseason portion. He had training camp at the first 6 quarters of the season. So it's not like he's completely new to it, but he at least is understanding what he's supposed to do better, even without all the live bullets that he would have gone through last season had he not got injured. But he brings up the fact there's a lot of guys who've come from the Rams who worked in the system. There's guys who come from Denver who have worked in the system. And he's getting along with Josie Jewell, that the team's come together fast, just not with the energy, but defensively, with the understanding of the scheme. And he also mentioned how this is the last year of him being a Panther. He's been in the league for 10 years, which, God, boy, does the time go by fast. And he says he still feels he has 5 years left of him. He knows he has to play well to be back next year in Carolina. And my expectation is, even if he plays well, it's going to be tough for that to be the case. Would love for that to be the case. He had to play really well. We'll see how it works out for Shaq Thompson. I would love for him to be a Panther. He wants to retire as a Panther. He said 5 years he has left in him. He talked about he had 4 years behind Thomas Davis and Luke Kuechly, then last year with the broken leg. That's kind of saved his body for 5 more years of playing football at this level. And I would love for the next 5 years for Shaq Thompson to be there in the middle of this defense in Carolina. We just know the reality is it's tough, and he understands it's a business. He has to do his part and then see how the chips fall. But he's going to do everything he can to get this team to the playoffs, to win, to wipe away what happened last year. And he is certainly bothered by it, and we could see that on Wednesday when he spoke to the media. So good vibes coming from Shaq, good vibes coming from everyone in the building. And hell, it's June 12th. Of course the vibes are good. If the vibes are bad, kind of like in New York with the Jets, because Aaron Rodgers is taking a vacation instead of being with his team, that's typically not a good thing. So those are the things that stood out to me coming from the media availabilities the last couple of days at mandatory minicamp. A couple other things stood out contract-wise. Eddy Pineiro wasn't there, but he was there the last 2 days. Deontay Johnson, could he get paid as well? We'll talk about those contract situations as Panthers head into summer break post-mandatory minicamp here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And whether you can go to the Finals or not, there's something else going on this weekend, which I will be at. I'm headed to Omaha for the College World Series. Got to go watch the Heels. Excited to watch the Wolfpack also on Saturday, and I used Game Time to get my tickets, and I got a really good deal. So excited to go see the Heels and the Wolfpack there in Omaha for the College World Series, where you, if you use Game Time, can save up to 60% off buying a last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view for your seat in the app before you buy. Take guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. It's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. There were a few more things that stood out to me during mandatory minicamp for the Panthers once we got to speak to Dave Canales, Shaq Thompson, and the rest of the Panther players. Eddy Pineiro, where you been, Eddy? That's been the question that a lot of people have been asking. Really not, I don't know if a lot of people, but has been asked weekly during the OTA portion of the offseason, which, again, voluntary. He did not have to be there. But it is a little odd that a kicker wouldn't be there. And the only time you don't really see guys show up is whether they're like a veteran, they just don't want to do it, and they feel like they're in a better position to go work out their own training, which is what Jadeveon Clowney said. He's been in Houston over the last couple of weeks working with his trainer, and he comes back here, he feels in better shape than he would be, so it's a lot harder than we're doing here, and he feels like it's more beneficial to him than being with the team during this voluntary portion. But he was here when it mattered for mandatory minicamp, so that is a positive. I don't think I take too much from it. Pineiro could be the same thing. But the only time you really don't see these guys show up, aside from older vet, going to do his own thing, is if they want a new contract. We've seen that play out with, T. Higgins, actually, he did show up. We saw it with Brandon Ayuk out there in San Francisco. Same thing's going on with Hassan Reddick, who the Jets traded for. He wants money. They're not willing to give it to him right now. He's like, I ain't coming. Eddy Pineiro, he was there, though, for mandatory minicamp. And I wasn't surprised. I figured he was always going to show up, and knowing that he is a kicker, and it's not, and he, yes, makes a lot of money. Just plainly looking at the rest of the country, makes a lot of money, but not enough money to where you think he wants to take $151,000 in fines over 3 days, which it wasn't 3 days. I don't know how much Panthers actually would have fined him had he not shown up, but still not a guy who really wants to take a fine. It's not like he's making as much as Mahomes or some of the high price players in the NFL. And it's still a lot of money, no matter how much you are making. He decided to show up. He was out there on Tuesday, not kicking. We saw Harrison Mevis, the thicker kicker out of Missouri. He was kicking, and he was accurate once again, making all 5 of them during the team special teams portion that the media saw. And then we did see on Wednesday that Eddy Pineiro was back out there kicking. He did say that that was the idea, that he was not going to be kicking on Tuesdays and get acclimated with his teammates. And on Wednesday, he would be there, which he did kick. So there's all that. They go back on break anyway, so not a huge deal. He had been in contact with Tracy Smith, the special teams coordinator here in Carolina. And when asked about his decision to skip, he said that's private right now between him and the Panthers, which makes you go, so why would it be private, Eddie? Do you want a new contract? Which he was asked, and he decided that he wasn't going to answer that question. So if you're not willing to say why you weren't around, and when someone asked you, is it because of money, and you say it's private between you and the team, it's probably because you want more money. So looking at Eddy Pineiro's contract heading into 2024, final year of his deal, $2 million base salary, $150,000 of that is guaranteed as a $2.545 million cap hit. And if the Panthers wanted to cut him, they'd save $1.8 million, which is not insignificant for a team that could still add, I don't know, another starter at corner, or just say starter at corner. Looking at it as well, his numbers, and this was brought up by Joe Person, since 2019, which is when he entered the league, top 3 in field goal accuracy, but bottom 3rd in contract among field goal kickers in the NFL. And looking at Pro Football Reference all time, Eddy Pineiro is the 3rd most accurate kicker at 89%, only behind Justin Tucker, who will have a bust in Canton, and Harrison Butker, who may get one as well, based off of the success the Chiefs have had and some of the big kicks he's had in his career so far. So Eddie said he's aiming to be top all time. And I was stunned when I heard that he was top 3 in accuracy since 2019, but also 3rd all time, which he brought up a lot. He was flexing about that. And you look back at his numbers, and I have come out here and I've said he's kind of been up, he's been down, he's been up, he's been down. Okay, so get back to his 2019 in Chicago, 82% field goal kicker, then didn't kick in 2020, made all 8 of his kicks in 2021 with the Jets, in the last 2 years in Carolina, 94% in 2022, 86% last season. So the up and down is like, okay, you were 82%, which is fine. And then you didn't kick, and then you did kick for not very long, and then you were really good, but then last year weren't as good. And that's the way I've kind of interpreted it. Now, I'm not saying he's a bad kicker. I think he's a good kicker, and I understand that this is an important position. The Panthers probably should take care of him. And I would understand too, if looking at where they're at, and if they don't want to pay Pineiro, even though the numbers, as far as all-time numbers, say you should keep this guy around. I can understand it in a way because Harrison Mevis, they're not a playoff team. It's a little bit different. Like, I can look at it, I bring up Butker, and I know someone's going to be saying to themselves, we could have kept Butker. Well, Gano is really good too. And if Graham Gano was healthy, then I don't think we would have been in a situation where they would have brought in Harrison Butker in the first place. Competition, it is a good thing as well. But still, looking at this whole thing, like, they should take care of Eddy Pineiro. They should have a competition and see whether Mevis can push. And if you want to take the guy with the bigger leg, and if he's more accurate, then go ahead and do it. But Pineiro, it's kind of hard to argue. If he's third most accurate of all time and he's not paid like that, you have to ask, why is that the case? But then you also have to ask yourself, all right, like, is it the smartest thing to do to keep him around, or do we let him go? We'll see how that all goes down. And he does say he will be there for the start of training camp. Didn't think that would be really much of a question at all. The other player, Deontay Johnson, he was asked by Mike K just about all the contracts they're being doled out to receivers this offseason. We saw what Justin Jefferson got earlier this week, or maybe it was last week. All the days are blending together right now. These guys are getting paid a ton of money, and there's a lot of guys still in line to get paid a ton of money. Deontay Johnson is not one of them right now as we sit here, but it's possible down the road. And he did say that he's going to let his game speak for itself. And if the Panthers feel like they want to extend him, he's all for it. Now, he will be a free agent. We'll have to see how things work out this season. I did say when they traded for him, would it make sense to just give him a new deal where he gets an extra year, like he gets this year and next, especially like kind of tie it to Bryce Young? Because he said, Deontay Johnson has said to the media and to Bryce himself that I'm here to make you better. I'm here to help you, which is good. That's why the Panthers brought you here, to make plays and to help Bryce and make him better. I would think it would behoove the Panthers to give him another year on that deal, to tie him to Bryce, because if he's really here to help Bryce and to be that playmaker, why not tie him to Bryce? Because Bryce has this year, next year, and if he's not able to do it in the next 2 seasons, then they're probably going to move on. I would just think that instead of putting yourself in a position where they've taken care of Derek Brown, thank God. We'll see how some of the, and J.C. Horn, they got him on that 50-year option. That's a good thing. But there could be another player who emerges where they have to figure out, what are we going to do here? Are we going to be able to sign this guy? Are we going to be able to franchise tag somebody? I just don't want to put the Panthers in this situation where they're like they were with Burns and they can't pay the guy, or they got to decide they can't keep him and they're going to let him test free agency, which is like kind of what Jacksonville did. So we'll see how it all works out. But Deontay Johnson, he agreed to a 2-year extension with the Steelers back on August 4th of 2022. It's a 2-year, $36 million deal that gives him a $7 million base salary this year, $3 million guaranteed, $10 million cap number. And the Panthers can extend him in the middle of the season if he is playing well and the Panthers are looking good and they feel like this relationship between him and Bryce is a budding one and one that they want to keep together. We could see an extension then, or we may see an extension after the season. We will see how that all plays out with Deontay Johnson. So we'll monitor that. And of course, Eddy Pineiro, which I think is probably the more pressing conversation as far as contract talks go as we get closer to training camp and really all that kind of comes to an end. I don't think there's me really anything with Johnson, but Pineiro is one to look at. Also, something we should monitor is injuries, because the Panthers, they have a couple of them in one position group. Kind of concerns me just where the injuries are coming from there. So we'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Dave Canales was asked on Wednesday following mandatory minicamp what he expects from his players over the next 6 weeks as they take this summer break. And he said, the customary, I want them to spend time with their families, stay in shape, and be ready to go once we have training camp at the end of July, which, of course, that's what he wants. I think he also wants the guys who are injured to be healthy once things get to training camp and get to the preseason, that we don't have the conversation that we're going to have now about whether this player will have to start off on PUP or if he'll be good to go. Because I do have a little bit of concerns with a couple of these. Xavier Legette, he is not one I'm all that concerned about, as he had the hamstring issue a couple of weeks ago that popped up during OTAs, and he's getting adjusted to the speed of the game. He's getting adjusted to just NFL life and all of that. So it's really more precautionary. I don't hate that he's not out there. as long as Leggett is healthy. Once we get not down, because I keep thinking we're going to Spartanburg. We're not going to Spartanburg, right here in Charlotte. Once we get to training camp, I'm good. But right now, he's got 6 weeks. Rest up, stay in shape as possible, as much as possible, and then we'll see you once we start training camp. DJ Johnson, that was one that was pretty concerning on Tuesday as he left practice with a knee injury and had a pretty big wrap on his knee, according to some reporters that were down there during minicamp on Tuesday. Dave Canales was asked about this on Wednesday. He said that he didn't get a specific report, but it's not serious. Thinks it's more precautionary than anything else, which is good news for the Panthers to not have another injury there at the edge rusher group, because of another DJ who plays edge rusher who we have not seen out on the field participating in these team drills is DJ Wonnum, who has a ways to go to continue to progress, according to Dave Canales. This is something I brought up to y'all a couple of weeks ago. I had a conversation with somebody, and they had told me that it appears that the quad injury that he suffered, that it was going to take him a little bit more time than a lot of people expected for him to be ready to go. And now that has been revealed by Dave Canales. I think he said something about it last week. And then again on Wednesday, he said something about it. And that's something I told y'all like 2 weeks ago. So that's why you got to listen to Locked On Panthers. Maybe get some nuggets like that. I appreciate all y'all who do. So that's the thing I'm concerned about. Like DJ Johnson, good that he's healthy. Like right now, he would be the starter opposite of Jadeveon Clowney until Wonnum is available. We hadn't really seen Caleb Jason until mandatory minicamp. Eku Leota is also someone who was mentioned among this pseudo injury report as he's still working his way back. So that's another edge rusher. That is a group. Like Clowney, it's kind of similar like last year. With Burns, that's the only guy I felt like confident in. Everyone else, we'll see what they can provide. And Clowney, like, I love what he said about stopping the runs and mentality. And Burns was not a great guy at stopping the run. Clowney is. Bigger body, but he definitely is. And that's one thing I'm excited to see him be able to do. As far as pass rushing, it's going to make it difficult for him if one of them is not available. And if DJ Johnson is still, struggling to produce at this level, and some of the other names in that room, like there's only one known commodity, and he really hasn't been, and he's mentioned the schemes, he's mentioned injuries, but he has not been like that alpha that a lot of us expected for those reasons I just brought up. But he's going to be the guy that every defensive coordinator is going to be keying on. And is Clowney going to be able to get through that? He's going to need his friends to be healthy. And it's kind of weird how we're kind of back in the same situation where you have your guy, and then everybody else in that position room, you hope they can step up. Now, one of them is a upgrade, I would think, to like what Marquise Haynes was thought to be this time last season. And same thing with Vitor Grospatos. And when you get to what Justin Houston was supposed to provide, you never got anything from him. So I feel like it's an upgrade as that second guy. He just got to be out there. If he's not out there, that's not good news for the Panthers, of course. Jonathan Brooks also, according to Dave Canales, quote, has a little bit of a ways to go. Ian Rappaport told us on draft night, July 1, that's when he would be cleared. It is June 12th. We still have time, I believe, 19 days until July 1, if I'm doing my math correctly. There's only 30 days in June, by the way, if you did not know that. So 19 days, and we'll see whether he's cleared. But whether he's cleared in 19 days, not super important. He's got to be cleared come July 19th. And really, I believe the 23rd or 24th. 19th is when the rookies have to report. I think the 23rd is when the vets report, and then 24th is the first day of practice. That's not official, but there again, there's news for you, folks. If you got to listen to Locked On Panthers, get you some of that stuff, don't have to wait. So there's that as far as Jonathan Brooks, who I think is going to take a little bit of time for him. Once he really gets going, it's going to be him, and it's going to be Chuba. It's going to be a 1A, 1B, two-headed monster, and then maybe even Miles Sanders, who's still here in Carolina. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where I will be back with you on Friday, one final time until July 19th, where I will be back to answer the rookie or your weekly Friday mailbag questions. Just going to be taking a little bit of break as I'm going to do position breakdowns, going to take some time off. Not going to be up here answering your questions, unfortunately, because I'm going to be recording these shows ahead of time just so I can breathe. So at me, DM me, get those questions in for Friday's show. Really get them in Like, get them in like Thursday, y'all, because I'm going to Omaha Friday morning, so I'm going to have to record the show on Thursday. So please get me the questions in right now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole, as always, and forever. Keep pounding. I'll talk to y'all on Friday.